Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin in Washington, where a bill aimed at forcing a sale of TikTok is moving forward on Capitol Hill. The House passed the TikTok divestment bill by a vote of 352 to 65. Republican Dan Crenshaw says there's a simple reason why he voted for it.
TikTok is owned by ByteDance. ByteDance is in China, and when you're in China, you have to do whatever the Chinese Communist Party says you have to do. That's according to the national intelligence law passed in 2017.
But fellow Republican Thomas Massie says the bill could do more than just ban TikTok.
It could also be named the Facebook Protection and Enhancement Act, because it's not the American people who are going to benefit most from this. It will be Facebook. Their stock is going to go up if this bill should pass the Senate.
Now, the bill does now head to the Senate, where its prospects are less clear. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has only said he'll review the bill. Democrat Marie Cantwell has not committed to taking up the legislation when it comes before her Commerce Committee.
Well, Nathan, the CEO of TikTok, says he is disappointed with the vote in the House. Shou Chu posted this video on X.
Over the last few years, we have invested to keep your data safe and our platform free from outside manipulation. We have committed that we will continue to do so. We will continue to do all we can, including exercising our legal rights, to protect this amazing platform that we have built with you.
In a memo seen by Bloomberg, TikTok reiterated its plan to lobby the Senate not to pass the legislation.
Karen, let's turn to presidential politics now. Donald Trump may be looking to Wall Street to fill some key cabinet positions if he wins the White House again. We get the story from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Bloomberg News has learned Trump has talked about hedge fund titan John Paulson as Treasury Secretary if he wins the November presidential election. Sources say Paulson hosted a fundraiser for Trump's re-election at his Palm Beach home last month, and he is scheduled to host another one for Trump in 3 weeks with Cantor Fitzgerald's Howard Lutnick. The sources say Paulson's name has come up in recent discussions, but the conversations were informal, and any discussions about a possible cabinet post are preliminary. Other potential names in the mix for the top Treasury post, should Trump defeat incumbent President Biden, include former Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Susquehanna International Group founder Jeff Yass. Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Jeff, thank you. Well, speculation swirls about John Paulson taking a role in Treasury. The current secretary is speaking out about the economy. Janet Yellen says it's, quote, unlikely that market interest rates return to levels that prevailed before the COVID pandemic triggered a wave of inflation and higher yields. 10-year U.S. Treasury yields averaged 2.39% in the decade through 2019. They spiked above 5% last October after the Fed raised rates aggressively to combat inflation. The 10-year now sits just below 4.2%.
And Karen, the busy week for economic data continues this morning with the release of retail sales and producer prices for the month of February. Let's get a preview from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
Fed officials and investors will get two more key pieces of data before the central bank's policy meeting next week. A strong rebound is forecast for February retail sales, which contracted in January. Private sector sources, including credit card systems, suggest spending picked up a lot in the last month. On the one hand, that would reassure Fed officials that the economy is not close to recession. On the other, it may feed fears that a strengthening economy will feed inflation. The Producer Price Index, also released today, may offer some clues. It's basically forecast to be stable after unexpectedly rising in January. The Fed and investors will be hoping economists are wrong and factory gate prices end up being softer than forecast. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Mike, thanks. Well, in company news, the hunt is on for Disney to pick an eventual successor to CEO Bob Iger. We get the story from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
And Karen, Disney has struggled with its succession planning in the past, and now they're making a stronger push to find somebody to replace CEO Bob Iger eventually. Disney's board focusing on 4 divisional heads. They're the TV chief, Dana Walden, ESPN's Jimmy Pitaro, the theme parks boss, Josh D'Amaro, and Alan Bergman, who heads the film business. Iger spending time with all of the candidates to share his Disney magic. This is happening under the glare of dissident shareholders like Nelson Peltz, who are seeking board seats at Disney's April 3rd annual meeting. Iger's contract runs through the end of 2026. No decision on a successor is expected this year. John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, John, thanks. Another C-suite news this morning. Under Armour says its founder, Executive Chairman Kevin Plank, is returning as CEO. That's a story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Stephanie Linnartz departs after she led just over a year of fitful efforts to reinvigorate the athletic brand. Plank will return to the CEO job on April 1st. Linnartz will remain an advisor to the company through April 30th. Lead director Mohamed El-Arian, an economist and columnist for Bloomberg Opinion, will succeed Plank as chairman. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Charlie, thanks. Well, investors await the highly anticipated IPO from Reddit. The social media company is giving guidance on its expectations. Bloomberg News has learned Reddit is telling potential investors that it expects revenue in 2024 to grow by more than 20% versus the previous year. According to a filing with the SEC, revenue in 2023 grew to just over $800 million.
And Karen, Saudi Arabia pushes ahead with one of the largest stock offerings in recent years. Bloomberg News has learned the kingdom's in talks to add top Wall Street banks for a secondary share sale in oil giant Aramco. Sources say Saudi plans to hire J.P. Morgan Chase as one of the main underwriters to the offering. Bank of America and Morgan Stanley are also contending for lead roles in the deal, which could raise as much as $20 billion.
And Nathan, a bullish forecast from the world's largest assembler of iPhones. Han High Precision Industry reported its second straight quarter of strong profit growth. The company says lucrative AI hardware sales helped offset weakness in iPhone and electronics demand. It posted a 33% rise in net income. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Ukrainian drone attacks halted 3 oil refineries deep within Russian territory in an assault President Vladimir Putin said was aimed at disrupting his presidential election later this week. The aerial strike caused a fire at one of the country's biggest crude processing facilities near Moscow. It comes as the Biden administration says it's concerned about President Putin again threatening to use nuclear weapons if his country is threatened. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, speaking on Air Force One with President Biden heading to Milwaukee, says Putin has made similar nuclear threats.
Russia's nuclear rhetoric has been reckless and irresponsible throughout this conflict. It is Russia that brutally invaded Ukraine without provocation or justification.
The U.S. has insisted it will not send American troops to fight in Ukraine. Add Whoopi Goldberg to the list of vocal critics of congestion pricing in Manhattan meant to ease traffic. New York Governor Kathy Hochul went on The View yesterday, but when the show went to commercial break, the cameras kept rolling.
What is the point? Because New Yorkers didn't mess up the streets of New York. We have bike lanes in places that we're not prepared for. We have trucks that are too big.
Governor Hochul tried to explain that the tolls below 60th Street are intended to ease congestion.
I can walk backwards in heels faster than most trucks can get down the streets right now.
Congestion pricing is expected to take effect in June. Jury deliberations resumed this morning in the case of James Crumbley. He is the father of the Michigan teen Ethan Crumbley, who opened fire at his high school in Oxford in 2021, killing 4 students. A jury will decide whether Ethan's father is responsible for enabling his son to carry out the deadly attack. The defense has argued James Crumbley could not have foreseen his son's deadly shooting rampage. However, prosecutors say he was complicit in downplaying the troubles his son was going through and did not do enough to secure the firearm that Ethan eventually used in the shooting. Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald.
There can be more than one cause of death. James Crumbley doesn't get a pass because somebody else also caused the death of these 4 kids.
James Crumbley's wife, Jennifer, was convicted last month of similar charges. Attorneys say Rudolph Giuliani's homes in New York and Florida may be put up for sale to help bring in cash as he works through his bankruptcy. The former New York mayor is facing nearly $153 million in debt. the bulk of which stems from a $148 million defamation judgment awarded to 2 Georgia poll workers he accused of rigging 2020 election results. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Well, we do bring you news throughout the day right here on Bloomberg Radio, but now you can get the latest news on demand whenever you want it. Just subscribe to Bloomberg News Now to get the latest headlines right at the click of a button. Get informed on your schedule. You can listen and subscribe to Bloomberg News Now on the Bloomberg Business app, Bloomberg.com, plus Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. It's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update, brought to you by Tri-State Audi. For that, we bring in John Stashower. John, good morning.
All right, good morning, Karen. The Yankees have had more than their share of injuries last couple of years, but Garrett Cole has been a mainstay as a Yank, has not missed a single start due to injury. Now he's hurt, an elbow injury that it has been reported will sideline Cole 1 to 2 months. The good news is there's no indication of a tear that would require surgery. Cole's headed to Los Angeles to see a specialist. So the question now is if the Yankees pursue a free agent pitcher. Blake Snell, last year's NL Cy Young winner, remains unsigned, as is the ex-Yank Jordan Montgomery. Yanks were said to be interested in trading for Dylan Cease, but the White Sox just traded him to San Diego. Joe Flacco was apparently retired at age 39, came out of it, joined Cleveland, quarterbacked the Browns to the playoffs, was the NFL Comeback Player of the Year. Flacco has signed with Indianapolis. Another QB, Kirk Cousins, introduced in Atlanta.
And I really believe, as I looked around at opportunities for me in free agency, that when a coach told me this when I was a young player in the league, coach I have a lot of respect for, he said, when the owner, general manager, head coach, and quarterback are on the same page, that's when you really have a chance to go win a Super Bowl. And as I looked at the Atlanta Falcons, I believe strongly that the owner, head coach, general manager, and quarterback can all be on the same page.
Falcons have not had even a winning record since 2017. Nets lost in Orlando, 114-106. Rematch of last year's NBA Finals, same result. Denver won in Miami. Knicks start their road trip tonight in Portland. The Rangers visit Tampa Bay. Capitals lost 7-2 in Edmonton. College basketball season-ending losses for Rutgers, Fordham, and Iona. Boston College, an upset win over Clemson to advance at the ACC tourney. At the Pac-12, Stanford beat Cal in overtime. Big game of the Big East today at St. John's against Seton Hall. Colgate won the Patriot. Red Raiders headed to a 5th straight NCAA tournament. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports.
What comes next in the effort to force a sale of TikTok by its Chinese owner ByteDance? The divestment bill has sailed through the House, but its prospects in the Senate look quite a bit less certain. And Bloomberg's Alex Webb is here now with more on this. Alex, there had seemed to be a fair bit of momentum for this bill, but it does really seem to have shifted in just a few days. Is this just about former President Trump changing his position, or is there more behind it?
I mean, clearly that helps, but there are a lot of complicating factors here. As you say, it was passed through the House with very big numbers, 352 to 65. In the Senate, there are a number of concerns. Firstly, of course, we're heading into an election cycle. A lot of young people, and including voters, use the app, and there's concern about alienating them. There are those particularly within the Republican Party, who are concerned that banning it somehow would be an infringement on free speech, and that's something actually some Democrats have agreed sort of align with too, particularly because they think it infringes upon the free speech of younger people. That's where a lot of young people express themselves. And thirdly, they just see it as a way of reaching those young voters too. So there are a number of different complicating factors. There is, of course, another big one, and it comes down to money, that there's a major Republican donor, Jeff Yass, who co-founded Susquehanna Group, and he has a 15% stake in ByteDance. There's a suspicion that he might be doing some things behind the scenes because he is a considerable donor to the Republican Party.
Interesting angle there, because we've got Bloomberg News reporting as well that former President Trump is considering Yass, among others, as a potential Treasury Secretary pick as he wins the White House, or if he does win the White House. But putting that aside, there's also this concern that's been raised by supporters of this bill that TikTok's data is beholden to the Chinese Communist Party. Is there clear evidence behind that?
So there are two ways of considering this. There's the data about people's browsing patterns, what they look at, what they buy, and there's the way that decisions on what content is served to people. Now, we don't have any proof or evidence that China is actually directly influencing that, but we can see some proof points. Namely, there was a study a few months ago which showed that if you search for instance, Tiananmen on TikTok compared to Instagram, it surfaces far more results on Instagram than it does on TikTok. So we don't know if that's a conscious decision, if there are other factors at play, but we can see the end result of whatever content decisions might be being taken at TikTok. And those are the sort of things that get people a little worried.
What's the potential impact, Alex, if this bill were to pass and TikTok were to divest? Are there potential buyers out there for TikTok if ByteDance were forced to sell?
Yeah, because that's the key thing here. It's like, is it going to be shut down or is it going to be divested? Don't forget that this did come up 5-6 years ago when Trump was the president. There were lots of potential buyers in the US. We had names like Oracle, we had Microsoft, lots of big tech companies in particular who don't necessarily have a social media arm. The thing that a lot of people find hyper compelling about TikTok is the ability to plug it onto the front of actually an advertising or e-commerce business, that you can use it to drive that alternative revenue. Like TikTok has an advertising business. It is still far early in its evolution than that of Google or Alphabet, that is, or of Meta. But that also provides a huge amount of upside if you're able to plug a sophisticated existing advertising business into the back of it. And so that's where people might spy an opportunity.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.